at a loud weekend party where people laughed, chatted, raised their glasses, and showcased themselves through boisterous stories, there was a man standing still in the corner of the room. He wasn't trying to attract attention. A glass of red wine in hand, his gaze wasn't directed at anyone in particular. It was as if he were following a distant thought. And in that very moment, the girl who had just walked in, amid dozens of eager eyes, stopped only at him. Women are not attracted to flamboyance. They are drawn to what makes them ask themselves, who is he? Why doesn't he look at me like the others do? The less you express, the more they want to explore. The less you reveal, the more it awakens their instinctive curiosity. In truth, women never fully say what they want, especially when it comes to attraction. They won't say they're drawn to a man with a quiet inner strength, who doesn't talk much, who doesn't need to show off, yet carries with him an energy they can't walk away from. But that's the truth, because emotional scarcity, something not easy to read, not easy to reach, is what creates the deepest allure. You don't need to change yourself to chase an ideal of attractiveness. You just need to become the complete, profound, and hard-to-reach version of yourself. On this journey, women are not the destination. They'll find their way to you when you are different enough. And now, let's explore 10 weak spots that seem invisible, but make it impossible for women to look away from you. It doesn't begin with words, but with action, silent yet powerful. 1. The man who acts without announcement. There's a type of man who doesn't stand out in a crowd, who doesn't raise his voice to assert anything, but still lingers in a woman's mind just because of one simple thing. He always shows up at the right time, not to say I'll handle it, but to silently do what needs to be done and leave, as if no acknowledgement is necessary, no unnecessary words, no glance seeking recognition. That day, the girl stood helplessly by the roadside, her motorbike broken down. A few people passed by and asked. Some looked and kept walking. But he, without many words, without being overly gallant, simply approached, checked briefly, and said, "There's a repair shop nearby. Let me push it for you." She was surprised by the decisiveness of a stranger, but what she couldn't forget wasn't that action. It was the way he quietly disappeared after finishing it. No request for contact, no further hints, as if what he did never needed a reward. That's the rare quality, a man who acts without leaving behind promises, but leaves behind an impression. In a world full of people who talk more than they act, he becomes the embodiment of consistency, and for women, that is unconsciously attractive. They don't need fancy words. They are drawn to a feeling of safety, that if this man speaks, he will follow through, and if he stays silent, it's because he's already doing it. Psychology calls this the consistency bias. When words and actions align, especially with regularity, the brain automatically labels trustworthy, and that trustworthiness, to a woman, is what triggers the desire to open up, to want to step into this man's world, even if that world never asks for an invitation. Don't mistake silence for invisibility. This type of man isn't quiet because he fears speaking, but because he understands real energy doesn't need advertising. He doesn't try to draw attention, and it's precisely that lack of need that makes others notice. And women with their intuition won't miss it. If you want to become a man like that, it doesn't take many skills. You only need to understand one thing: don't speak when you can act. When someone faces a problem, don't ask, "Do you need help?" Help. Then, quietly step away. That very action, repeated often enough, will say everything for you. You are someone they can rely on, not because you say so, but because you live that way. Women won't remember everything you said, but they will remember clearly what you did or didn't do in the moments they truly needed someone. And in that wordless memory, you may become the first person they think of, not because you tried to make an impression, but because you left behind a quiet presence. 2. The man who's steady like a rock. There are people who make their presence felt without stepping loudly, without needing to speak, but when they show up, the space seems to settle. They don't attract eyes through noise, but through a strangely quiet energy that makes those around them feel safe, even if they can't explain why. You've seen that kind of man in heated discussions where people argue to the point of losing their voices to emotion. He doesn't join in. He doesn't try to intervene either. He just sits there, hand resting loosely on a coffee cup, eyes gazing into the space ahead, not cold, but calm. And because of that, everything around him seems to slow down, to soften. This isn't indifference, it's inner steadiness, a silent strength that women, through their intuition, instantly recognize. If everything around falls apart, this man won't crumble. In fact, psychology has a clear explanation for this: the emotional contrast effect. In a volatile environment, the one who remains least shaken creates the strongest gravitational pull. Just as a ship needs an anchor in stormy seas, a woman's emotions seek a man like a grounding point, not because he says, "Lean on me," but because he truly is calm enough to lean on. Moreover, if you pay attention, you'll notice women don't always seek someone eloquent or expressive. They don't need someone who wins every argument. They need someone who stays when the storm hits, without being swept away by fleeting emotions. That kind of steadiness doesn't lie in a cold demeanor. It lies in the ability to stay in control when others lose theirs. The man who's steady like a rock doesn't try to maintain an image. He's simply experienced enough to know reacting rashly only makes things worse. And silence at the right time can often create a deeper connection than words. Beyond that, this also carries a subtle message, one women are highly attuned to. If you can control yourself, you can handle the situation. And if you can master the storm within, you can lead through the chaos outside. So if you're asking what to train in order to become more attractive, start here. Stay calm in chaos, stay firm in doubt, and stay still when others lose control. No one can fake true steadiness, because it doesn't lie in facial expressions or words. It lies in how you choose to respond, or choose not to. 3. The man who quietly pursues his goal. There's a strange kind of allure, not coming from looks, nor from sweet words, but from the way a man lives with his goal, quietly, steadily, without needing anyone to notice. And she only discovered it by accident, not through someone's story, but from scattered fragments, a short midnight story post, the light of a laptop reflecting on a tired yet focused face, or a random comment from a friend. Seems like he's been staying up late to study coding. She heard it, but couldn't ignore it, because there was something about you she couldn't overlook, not because you were trying to prove something, but because you didn't need to prove anything at all. She didn't know where she heard it, that you often stayed up until 2 a.m. to study programming, maybe from a mutual friend, or from a blurry story post she happened to see late at night. Not for showing off, no grind mode or working hard, just some blinking code lines paired with a quiet track. Yet it stayed with her. Then she thought. Then she cared. You never told anyone you were learning to build something of your own. You didn't go online to complain about being tired or overwhelmed because you weren't learning to get praised. You were learning because you wanted to become better, quietly, persistently, every night. And that very thing, unexpectedly, became what pulled her in. Women are often drawn to men with passion, That's nothing new, but what pulls them deeper is when that passion doesn't need to be recognized. That's when they realize you're living for something beyond yourself, and that very energy triggers a psychological effect called the admiration trigger. Psychology has shown we are unconsciously drawn to people with a clear direction because they represent a kind of growth we long to see in ourselves. When a woman sees you living for a goal big enough, without needing others to agree, without craving applause, she'll start to ask herself, if he dares to walk his own path, do I want to be a part of that world? And then, as she learns more about you, she won't be impressed by the results you've achieved, but by how you got there. The way you kept going every night, the way you turned down parties just to finish a difficult test, the way you stayed silent when others bragged about their wins and kept moving forward like no one was watching. Many think they need massive success to be noticed, but no. What makes you attractive isn't the destination, but the way you're truly living for what you believe in, without needing anyone to validate it. So, if you're walking your own journey, don't stop just because others don't see it. The ones who truly observe are quietly watching, and sometimes that silence says far more than any praise ever could. 4. The man who's hard to read, but never plays games. Not every man enters a woman's heart through the spotlight or sweet words. Some attract through the exact opposite, purposeful silence. They don't put themselves on display, don't constantly update, and because of that, they make others wonder, what's behind that calmness? Yesterday, you invited her out for a walk, had a gentle conversation about things rarely mentioned on a first date. Then today, you vanished from every familiar signal. No text, no online interaction. She started to notice. Then the next day, a short message appears, the cover of a book, and a line that felt like it found her exact frequency. Page 78 reminded me of the way you see things. I'd like you to have this. You weren't testing her. You were simply holding a distance just enough for emotions to arise naturally. That wasn't by accident. This very ambiguity of emotion is what draws people in, like a song that's never fully written. Unfinished emotional moments linger because the brain has a tendency to complete what's incomplete. In psychology, this is called the controlled emotional ambiguity effect. When someone shows care, yet holds part of themselves back, the other person is driven by the need to decode that unclear emotion. And when someone makes you think about them even in their absence, that's the beginning of a longing that carries weight. Of course, this is fragile. Without subtlety, you might unintentionally hurt someone. Being hard to read doesn't mean making others feel insecure. You don't use silence as a weapon, nor should you ignore as a power move. Instead, you show up at the right moment with depth, then step back to let emotions breathe on their own. Attraction doesn't lie in confusing her. It lies in making her want to understand you more, not out of insecurity, but because she senses there's an unexplored depth behind that quietness. In the end, you don't need to appear and disappear like a tactic. You just need to live in your own rhythm, unhurried, unforced, because sometimes the stillness between two appearances is what makes her unable to forget you. In crowded places, men often do everything they can to get noticed, especially when there's a beautiful woman in the room. But in the midst of all that noise, true attraction often belongs to the one who does nothing at all. That evening, she walked into the bar, all eyes naturally drawn to her. Guys gathered around, trying to slip into the conversation, cracking jokes, working hard to impress. But in the corner of the room, you were chatting with the bar owner, not pretending, but genuinely drawn into her story about how she roasts Italian coffee the old-fashioned way. You didn't look at her, didn't join the competitive atmosphere. And it was that very choice that made you stand out more than anyone trying to win her gaze. Attraction doesn't come from being at the center of the stage, but from not needing a stage at all to be yourself. There's an interesting psychological mechanism called the reverse desire effect. When you don't seek attention, you often become the very thing people can't stop paying attention to. Why? Because people, especially women, are drawn to what's outside their control. When you're not chasing anything, it tends to move toward you. When a woman realizes you don't care about winning in the game of impression, her mind starts to ask, why isn't he like the others? What does he know that I don't? Curiosity is born from silence. Desire stems from the space that remains unfilled. Picture another situation. The group goes hiking. While everyone's taking selfies with the most eye-catching girl, you're down at the bottom of the hill, helping the driver light a fire to boil water for tea. When she turns back and doesn't see you in the fun, she starts to notice. Not because you tried to catch her attention, but because you didn't join the competition, and that made you the wild card. Self-containment is a quiet weapon. You don't reject her, but you don't let her presence define your value either. You move to your own rhythm, and that, in itself, makes her want to step into your world. The key here is, don't try to use indifference as a tactic. Women are smart enough to sense when you're faking disinterest. But if you truly don't see her as the center of your universe, not out of pride, but because you're living for something bigger, her eyes will find their way to you unconsciously. She will feel that you're someone to discover, not someone trying to impress. And in a world full of noise, the most attractive thing is someone who doesn't try to be noticed, and yet remains unforgettable. 5. The man who's already approved by other women. People believe in what's affirmed by others, and women, with their sharp intuition and deep emotional attunement, especially believe in what other women feel. You might be quiet, not someone who flaunts, but imagine an Instagram profile with no flashy captions, just pictures of you wandering through cities with a group of smart, independent female friends, their eyes bright, their smiles unforced. No need to write anything, the image says it all. This man is chosen by women of value, and to the woman silently observing you, that carries 10 times the weight of any self-promotion. This isn't a game of showing off girls, as some might think. It's a real psychological effect called the pre-selection effect. Here's how it works. When a man is valued by other women, he is instantly perceived as high value by the rest, without having to prove anything up front. A friend of mine once shared, "At first, I thought he was just okay. But then I saw some photos of him traveling with a few really cool girls, like independent, real, not fake, and I suddenly thought, a guy like that probably isn't average." She started paying more attention, and eventually, she was the one to initiate the first conversation. This effect is rooted in human instinct for survival and mate selection. In nature, females tend to choose males already selected by others. It signals strength, adaptability, and emotional safety. In modern society, this translates into a kind of social proof. Women don't need much logical reasoning to find you attractive. They just need to know others like them have already approved you. But the important thing is, don't fake it. Don't stage photos with girls just to look in demand. Women are perceptive. They'll sense that right away, and the feeling of being duped will lower your value faster than anything else. Instead, truly build meaningful relationships with women, not for gain, not with the intent to flirt. Learn to respect, to listen, to be present with strong, genuine women. That presence will reflect outward naturally. You're not trying to seem worthy. You're experienced as worthy by those who are wise enough to see it before you ever enter a new relationship. And in a world where everyone's shouting to be seen, the man already chosen by others becomes the one a woman wants to choose next. 6. The man who's already vouched for by other women. After all the men trying to stand out, what caught her attention was someone who had already been quietly affirmed by others, not through words, but through subtle signals, the way you're present in the lives of other women, naturally, without stiffness, without trying to stand out. You don't talk much, but somewhere in your feed are simple moments: a trekking trip with female friends, a cafe in Hoi An filled with gentle laughter, a photo someone took from behind as you were in the middle of a conversation. No hints, no cliché hashtags, but if you pay attention, one thing becomes clear: the women who appear beside you, they're not pretending. They're smart, independent, and not the type to casually be close to just anyone. And that's what creates the pull. Women don't just watch you, they watch how other women respond to you. If the opposite sex, especially high-value women, feel at ease and trusting around you, they'll subconsciously conclude, there's something safe about this man. This isn't about feelings. It's a behavior that's been thoroughly studied in human psychology, known as the pre-selection effect. In nature, females often choose a mate based on signs that he has already been successfully chosen. In modern society, it becomes a kind of unspoken trust. If women with standards have chosen you, I don't need to test you from scratch. I once heard a very simple story. A woman used to see a male colleague as quite unremarkable. He was quiet, punctual, and blended in, until one day she happened to spot him on a charity trip with a few female co-workers she deeply respected. In the group photo, they were laughing with him as if they were old friends. She never looked at him the same way again, not because he changed, but because his presence had been endorsed by others without him needing to say a word. The key here is, you can't manufacture the appearance of being pre-approved by borrowing images of women. Women are perceptive enough to know what's genuine and what's staged. If you're living freely, without effort to impress, and sincerely within your relationships, that sends a signal on its own. You don't need to force anyone to believe in you. Others will trust you just by seeing who has trusted you before. Attraction doesn't come from trying to grab attention. It comes from not needing to and still staying in people's memory. Not because you were the loudest, but because others believed in you first. 7. The man with his own energy scent. Attraction doesn't always come from words or actions. Sometimes all it takes is someone passing by, leaving behind a familiar scent, and her whole body stiffens because the memory of you has just returned. But this isn't just about cologne. It's the totality of something called an energy scent. It could be the way you enter a room, unhurried, quiet, but just enough for everyone to feel something has subtly shifted. It could be your voice, deep, steady, not trying too hard to impress but making people want to hear it again. And it could be the scent of your skin after an afternoon run, or the gentle woody cologne you chose, not to seduce, but because it feels like you. It's that combination from your gaze, your voice, your walk, to your scent, that forms a presence with its own identity, so much so that if one day she comes across someone who resembles you even slightly, her mind will immediately recall you, like a reflex. Psychology calls this olfactory emotional tagging. Emotions and scents are deeply intertwined through the limbic system, the part of the brain that stores emotional memories. That means, if you ever created a deep emotional moment and a scent was present, the brain links the two together. The next time she smells something similar, the old feeling will rise again, and you, unconsciously, will come alive again in her memory. But the more fascinating truth is, you can consciously shape this emotional identity, not by trying to become someone else, but by refining who you already are. Start with something small. Choose a scent that evokes emotion and feels personal to you. Maybe it's musk, cedarwood, or even the scent of freshly laundered fabric, as long as it feels right for you. Then, train how you show up. You don't need to speak much, but every sentence should be clear, intentional, and honest. Slow your walk just a little. Let your gaze linger 1 second longer when talking. These seemingly small things are the wordless parts of you, but they leave the strongest impression. The important thing isn't to become special, just to be remembered. It's to live clearly enough that when she recalls a beautiful emotional memory in her life, you're the person that memory chooses to name. Because in the end, people don't remember you for what you said. They remember how they felt in the space you once walked through. 8. The man who lives for a personal ideal. There are moments when she happens to walk past you on a late afternoon as you're sketching quietly in a familiar cafe. Not for anyone, not to show off. You're simply living alongside what stirs your heart. A piece of music, an unfinished poem, a few old pages from a book, or a block of code you've been refining through the night. That kind of immersion, quiet, unpretentious, holds a strange gravity. Women, unconsciously, are drawn to those who live for something greater than themselves, not as a way to impress, but as a silent flame that burns within, slow and strong, free yet grounded. A man like that doesn't need to chase any image. He doesn't need to be the center, nor does he strive for attention. But the very fact that he's immersed in what he believes makes others want to come closer, because passion, especially when not aimed at anyone, is inherently magnetic. When you live for something, even just a small hobby or a big ideal, your gaze changes, your rhythm deepens, and your actions begin to emit a kind of energy that's unmistakably yours. It's something others can feel, even if they can't fully explain. Studies show long-term attraction doesn't lie in what's visible, but in the sense that this person has a private inner world. A world that needs no validation, no applause, yet remains whole. And that's what makes a woman want to step into it, not to change it, but to walk alongside it. She might not understand your fascination with the I Ching, or why you lose track of time whenever the guitar strings hum, but that honesty with your inner emotion, needing no agreement, no acknowledgement, makes you unforgettable in her eyes. Because the man who lives for his own ideal isn't just someone who knows what he wants. He is someone who inspires others simply by showing up as himself. And maybe, on some quiet day, when she hears a melody you once played, or walks past a gallery of paintings, she'll remember you, not because you tried to leave a mark, but because you never had to try, and yet it could never be forgotten. 9. The man who understands emotion without needing explanation. You walk in, silently, and place a cup of tea in front of her, not to make her feel better, not to probe, just to say, in your own way, I'm here, and you don't have to pretend to be okay in front of me. That alone creates a kind of safety so deep it lingers. You don't need to guess how she feels. Just be sensitive enough not to interrupt, gentle enough not to add weight. A warm cup, a steady look, a presence that asks nothing. These seemingly small gestures can become the foundation of lasting trust. True emotional connection doesn't live in the phrase "I'm here for you," but in the feeling "you didn't say a word, yet I didn't feel alone." Women live through intuition. They don't always need answers. They need the freedom to be themselves, even when that self is fragile, imperfect. When a man is quiet enough to resonate, deep enough to sense. He creates a sacred space where a woman can breathe, can be still, can be sad without apology, where she isn't pushed to feel better right away, where no smile is required to prove she's fine, just presence, close enough to feel, far enough not to intrude. That's what makes your presence a place she returns to, not avoids. Beautiful memories aren't always joyful moments. Sometimes they're the time someone sat beside you when you weren't okay and didn't make you feel guilty for it. What's most attractive isn't talent, looks, or even gallantry. It's when a man can make a woman feel peace within his silence, when he doesn't try to understand through words, but lets her feel seen through the quiet of his heart. And then, without realizing it, she'll think of you every time her soul trembles, not because you tried to impress, but because you became something rare, a calm place in a loud world. 10. Body language signals when you should take a step forward. There are things people can't put into words, but their bodies will speak them for you. For women, body language is the most powerful form of communication to express attention, emotion, and attraction. The only issue is that not every man is sensitive enough to read these signals. You're talking with her at a small cafe, the space quiet enough to truly hear each other, and then you notice something strange. She unconsciously mirrors your gestures. When you adjust your sleeve, she touches her hair. When you lean forward, her gaze follows the same direction. This is not a coincidence. It's unconscious synchrony. When someone feels comfortable, they begin to reflect the movements of the person they're with without even realizing it. Then her eyes stay on you longer than just a passing glance, not just looking but holding your gaze, as if her eyes carry more than she can say. And if you've ever caught that kind of look, you know what it feels like. Your heart skips for a reason, and you're not mistaken. Other signs often show up too. Her hand lightly brushing her hair, her neck, or even her lips, areas that hold deep emotional resonance in the subconscious. She'll find subtle ways to get closer to you, even when the physical distance was already close enough for conversation. When someone chooses to step into your personal space, it needs no explanation. Her feet will point toward you, her hands relaxed, her posture open, not guarded. This is a clear signal of openness, showing that she's not just present, but willing to receive. Sometimes she'll find excuses to lightly touch you, a tap on the shoulder while laughing, a gentle push when you tease her, or that moment she pretends to need help just to touch your hand for a second. And then, as the meeting ends, you notice her hesitating, as if she wants to linger just a bit longer, but doesn't know how to ask you to stay. If you sense these signs, don't hesitate. In that moment, she's not asking for anything grand, but she is silently inviting you to step closer. It's a wordless invitation, clearer than any verbal confession. However, you must also pay attention to the opposite signals. If she crosses her arms, lowers her head, or keeps more distance than necessary, that's another kind of whisper. I need space. And you should respect that, because sometimes sensitivity is the very reason you might be invited back next time. Feelings shouldn't be forced, and the first step should always rest on quiet consent. When you step forward at the right time, not too early, not too late, that's when true connection begins to bloom. We've just explored 10 of women's so-called weak points, not in a negative sense, but as instinctive moments, emotional depths, and unconscious invitations that intelligent men can recognize, connect with, and turn into genuine magnetism. From the man who moves in silence to the one who pursues his ideals with quiet passion, from a mysterious gaze to an energy that can't be copied, to an emotional sensitivity that needs no words. We talked about modeling effects, The allure of controlled emotional ambiguity, the safety of being near someone calm, and the primal pull of body language. Each trait isn't just a technique, it's a natural reflection of a man who lives with depth, knows who he is, and doesn't need to prove it. The key isn't to apply each part one by one, it's to reflect on yourself. Are you living like the kind of man women are drawn to, or just chasing surface-level attention? If there was one part of this video that made you nod the hardest, what was it? Drop a comment to let me know which point resonated most with you, or which one you're looking to grow into next. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to support the channel, share it with someone who's still figuring things out with women, and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming. We'll dive even deeper into psychological insights, communication strategies, and how to develop inner magnetism. Now go ahead, move on to the next video on screen, where you'll learn the signs a woman truly likes you, and how not to miss that moment.